pleased to be here, and I thank our witnesses for joining us this afternoon. What I hope is a valuable discussion, and expect to be a valuable discussion. We convened this hearing because of the importance of the aviation and travel industry, a vital component of our nation's economy, and trying to find ways to make certain that that industry is stable, including in difficult times like a government shutdown. That stability is severely inhibited by the critical functions at the Federal Aviation Administration when they're suspended or when they're interrupted, and when Congress fails to act, the FAA and the aviation industry suffer. I'm pleased that the cancellations and delays plaguing our flights, airlines and airports are easing. One of the witnesses and I were on a flight that was delayed, but only for mechanical reasons this week, which has been different than it was previously. Our air traffic controllers are reporting to work, and other essential activities at the FAA are back underway. Thanksgiving, however, is just a few days away, and while we anticipate the airlines will be fully or nearly fully recovered from come next week, lingering strain and fatigue on the system perhaps is to be expected. There's roughly 31 million passengers are expected to fly next week for the holiday, but there may be lingering impacts on the system because of the shutdown. I look forward to the former governor, Governor Sununu, speaking to us this afternoon, hopefully providing us with a roadmap as to what Americans flying next week will expect from the airlines. Last week, the U.S. Travel Association noted that more than $6 billion were lost in travel spending because of the inability to fly, and we cannot afford, I'm sure the airlines and others, the people who work in the airports and in aviation, cannot further afford the instability and chaos. Our recent inaction in Washington has undoubtedly deterred young people from pursuing careers as air traffic controllers or other aviation professionals, a workforce we must prioritize. I hope that consideration of the fiscal year 2026 THUD, the Transportation Appropriation Bill, will begin in the Senate this week. That is the plan, and we're working to try to accomplish that, and will lay a groundwork for Congress to fully fund the Department of Transportation and the FAA with the resources it needs. The Senate appropriators passed the THUD bill in July by a vote of 27-1, a very bipartisan demonstration there. Within this bill, we provided the Department of Transportation nearly $26 billion and the FAA nearly $20 billion between their operations and facility and equipment accounts, which fund air traffic control and modernization activities. This funding is in part there to allow Secretary Duffy and Administrator Bedford to modernize our national airspace system after decades of insufficient budget requests that merely sustained an outdated system. This issue received particular attention by me on January the 29th when the tragic circumstances occurred involving a flight from Wichita, Kansas to DCA occurred. It was a moment that this Congress, this subcommittee, and the administration all gathered around the idea of improving the safety of our airways. We must do our part to enable the FAA and the Department of Transportation to make certain that America remains the standard for aviation and air safety. The sole integrator of the brand new air traffic control system is set to be announced soon and will fully fund the Department of Transportation for FY26 is a necessary step to modernizing our airspace. We will hear from industry about ways to potentially insulate the FAA from future government shutdowns. I introduced legislation in many Congresses that allow for the continuation of essential FAA activities in the event of future shutdowns. By examining the delays, the cancellations, the staffing triggers, and certification interruptions, we are laying the groundwork to better support an industry that is critical to our country. Again, I thank all of our witnesses for being here, and I look forward to this discussion, and I recognize the ranking member of the committee, Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, today's hearing injects cheap partisan politics into a subcommittee that up until this point had rightly prided itself on working in a bipartisan manner, whether you or I wielded the gavel. Using this subcommittee to mount a partisan attack on Senate Democrats under the guise of exploring a question that everyone already knows the answer to, are shutdowns bad for aviation safety, is an unfortunate departure from our past practice. Yes, government shutdowns are bad. Shutdowns are painful for all members of the career civil service that Donald Trump has gleefully attacked and traumatized since the first day of his chaotic second term in office. Shutdowns harm Americans that rely on their government for critical support and services, like the hungry kids that Trump refused to feed despite sitting on a $6 billion SNAP contingency fund. That's why Democrats voted to prevent a shutdown and voted repeatedly to reopen the government. Look, it's good that Senate Republicans finally agree with us that shutdowns are bad. I only wish there had been bipartisan agreement that millions of Americans losing health care coverage is also bad. Had Donald Trump and my Republican colleagues merely agreed with us on that principle, there would never have been a government shutdown in the first place, period. The sad irony is that failure to extend middle-class tax relief will hit red states the most. And the damage won't be merely disruptive and damaging, it will be catastrophic for Americans already struggling to get by. If Republicans fail to cleanly extend the ACA tax credits, the uninsured rate in Kansas will explode by 32% in 2026. And in Texas, the threat is even worse, with the Texas uninsured rate projected to skyrocket by 39%. 39%. Now, when it comes to championing our chronically overworked and understaffed ATC workforce, I will take a backseat to nobody on this committee. I will not be lectured by a senator who professes to love our controllers only when it's politically convenient. But when behind closed doors, away from cameras, that Cancun-loving senator not only failed to advocate for a max hiring requirement during FAA reauthorization negotiations, he actually opposed it. Let's make it clear, the guy that you think loves air traffic controllers opposed max hiring requirements for air traffic controllers during FAA reauthorization. So if Senate Republicans truly cared about controllers, beyond using them as partisan political pawns, they would have done what they've done numerous times before they truly care about something: change the rules. Yet, not only did Senate Republicans fail to change the rules to allow a simple majority to reopen the government, they blocked numerous Democratic bills from passing that would have paid civil servants during the shutdown. They even failed to force a vote on Chairman Cruz's bill to pay controllers during that shutdown. He had a bill to pay you. I also don't want to hear any BS about Donald Trump caring about air traffic controllers. If Trump cared about controllers being paid, he would have paid them. Does anyone seriously think that Donald Trump needs congressional permission to raid the Airport and Airway Trust Fund to keep the FAA operating during a shutdown? Please. He didn't ask for permission to raid the DoD R&D accounts to ensure that the military received paychecks during a shutdown. I'm glad they did, but he paid them because he wanted to. He didn't pay you because he didn't want to pay you. When Trump cares about something like building a ballroom, bailing out Argentina, denying SNAP benefits to low-income Americans, he just does it. If he wanted to pay air traffic controllers, he would have paid you. Consequences, laws, and norms be damned as far as he's concerned. Trump's failure to simply cut paychecks for air traffic controllers confirms what should have already been obvious. Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about the ATC workforce. Look, the shutdown is over. But for 500,000 Illinoisans, millions of Texans, and over 200,000 Kansans, the threat of a devastating healthcare crisis looms large. This includes Americans like our witness here today, Ms. Eileen Spickler of Ottawa, Kansas. Eileen's husband, Barry, will be forced to forego health insurance because they simply can't afford to lose the $1,100 in tax relief that enables them to afford their monthly premiums. Eileen and Barry are not unique. They are among the 24 million Americans who are desperate for Republicans to extend enhanced premium tax credits. This should be easy. We just need to strike a word or two, or simply replace numbers in 2 places in the tax code. That's it. If Speaker Johnson had the courage to bring it to a vote, there are at least 229 votes in the House to pass the bipartisan Premium Tax Credit Extension Act, a Republican-authored bill that would cleanly extend the ACA's enhanced premium tax credits. I truly hope Senate Republicans will see the light and realize delivering tax relief that makes health care affordable for middle-class Americans can be, and indeed should be, a common-sense affordability policy that unites Republicans and Democrats alike. And let's stop turning this committee into partisan sham attacks on one another and get down to the real work of keeping America's flying public safe. I yield back.
I'd like to introduce our witnesses for today. Our first witness is Nick Daniels, the President of the National Air Traffic Control Association. In his role, Mr. Daniels advocates for the dedicated air traffic controllers who oversee and safeguard our national airspace. Prior to his role, he served as an air traffic controller and as a former U.S. Marine. Our second witness is Chris Sununu, the President and CEO of Airlines for America, which represents our country's major carriers and cargo companies. Mr. Sununu is the former governor of New Hampshire and the longest-serving Republican governor in nearly a century. I believe it's your first appearance before a committee. We welcome you. Our third witness, James Viola, and I believe this is a maiden appearance for you, Mr. Viola, is President and CEO of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. In his role, Mr. Viola represents the interests of over 140 airframe, avionic, engine, and component manufacturers for the aviation industry. And our final witness is Mrs. Eileen Spickler, a resident of Ottawa, Kansas. Ms. Spickler, a special welcome to you. I now recognize Mr. Daniels for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, other members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on the effects of the 43-day federal government shutdown, the longest in American history. Every day that the shutdown continued, the margins of safety that we and the flying public depend on were reduced in our nation's airspace system. I am proud to have earned the title of Air Traffic Controller with 22 years of experience at both an FAA tower and en route facility, as well as 5 years as an air traffic controller in the United States Marine Corps. Unfortunately, before the shutdown ended, air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals that NACA represents received 1 partial paycheck and 2 $0 paychecks, despite working full-time and in many cases, mandatory overtime. 7 weeks of work with no certainty of when we would be paid again. That said, controllers showed up and stepped up for the American flying public and for each other. No American should ever be forced to work without a paycheck, and failing to pay the workforce that keeps our skies safe is not acceptable and not sustainable. Throughout the shutdown, air traffic controllers ensured that the safety of nearly 3 million passengers a day on more than 45,000 flights a day arrived at their destinations. And controllers did this while operating with an overall shortage of 3,800 fully certified controllers that the system requires. Now, the unfortunate reality is, this is not new. NACA has been advocating for increased controller staffing for more than a decade. NACA thanks this committee for its work to address the shortage in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024. It not only updated the FAA's controller staffing targets, it also requires the FAA to hire the maximum number of controller trainees for 5 years and deploy tower simulator systems at every FAA tower to improve training and reduce training times. This committee must continue its oversight role to ensure that the requirements it established come to fruition. But the effects of the shutdown had real consequences for hardworking, patriotic American workers. 2 weeks ago, we delivered over 1,600 handwritten letters from air traffic controllers to congressional offices expressing the hardships that they were experiencing. We heard from an air traffic controller that is training at our new facility. Her husband is a 20-year, 5-time combat veteran who had 45 documented explosions and 7 direct hits. He returned from Iraq and Afghanistan with a 100% permanent and total service-related disability. Consequently, she is the single source of income for her family. Their son just graduated in AVA school, but they couldn't afford to attend the graduation. In addition to training at her new facility, she sold plasma twice, started driving for DoorDash, and towards the end of the shutdown, she had to take a part-time job on her regularly scheduled days off. We heard from recent graduates of the Oklahoma City Air Traffic Controller training in Oklahoma where they were resigning because they could not begin this challenging new career without a paycheck. We've heard from air traffic controllers who were struggling to find ways to pay for gas to get to and from work, while others struggled to pay for childcare so they could go to work. Air traffic control is one of the most mentally demanding and high-consequence professions in the world. Every moment we are at work, it requires everything we have: focus, judgment, decisiveness, perfect decision-making, thousands of times a shift. And what hangs in the balance is our responsibility to safety in order to prevent tragedy. Air traffic controllers must show up day in and day out, fully prepared to handle the stress, pressure, and the weight of our responsibility to the American flying public and their safety. And this is why NACA does support Chairman Moran's Aviation Funding Stability Act that would ensure the FAA would be able to pay employees and perform all of its functions in the event of a future shutdown. We also support the passage of any other legislation that would ensure this nation's air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals are paid during any future shutdown, including Chairman Cruz's Keep America Flying Act of 2026. Air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals are this country's patriots, dedicated to the safety of the flying public, and they should never be subjected to these challenges that distract them from their critical safety responsibilities. They are real people, they are real Americans, and they were facing very real problems. They deserved better. And I'll be happy to take your questions.
Mr. Daniels, thank you. Senator Sununu, excuse me, I know Senator Sununu, Governor Sununu.
Sorry, no senator here, but I appreciate it. Well, let me just begin by obviously thanking Chairman Moran and Senator Duckworth for holding the hearing. Coming off the unprecedented 6-week shutdown, the airline industry definitely appreciates the promptness that this body showed in having this discussion on how government shutdowns not just affect the airlines, but the American people and the American economy. I also want to recognize and thank the efforts of the TSA employees, the CBP employees, and of course the air traffic controllers represented here by Nick Daniels. All those individuals who showed up week in and week out without paychecks, without certainty, and made those personal sacrifices because they understood that the national airspace isn't something that this country can put at risk. They understood that the airline industry and its people, they are a national strategic asset, and I hope we can all agree should never be used as a political football. Now, the good news is we all know that this problem can and should be avoided, and there are opportunities before this body that would remedy the situation, not just temporarily, but permanently. That leads me to a special thanks to Chairman Moran for his Aviation Funding Stability Act. We need solutions like this to be implemented to shield the FAA and its workforce from the politics of a shutdown. So let me put into perspective the trends that the industry saw and was forced to react to as that shutdown progressed. One of the bigger questions that we receive. Typically on any given regular travel day, we can expect to see any controller staffing shortages cause about 5% of the overall delay. So for every delay that's out there, 1 out of every 20 might be because of a staffing shortage on a typical day. And so to ensure safety during the first 4 weeks of the shutdown, we saw that number triple to 16%, which again, to put into perspective, the cancellations weren't there, right? The delays were there because it was all about safety. But for the cancellations in those first 4 weeks, it was well under 1% of actual cancellations, which means the system was slowed down with increased delays, but the airlines, the FAA, the air traffic controllers themselves, they were mitigating the situation around the clock to ensure that passengers were getting where they were going and they were doing it safely. It was a Herculean effort, but with far better results than were seen in the last 2019 shutdown. Then came Halloween, which was America's true nightmare for our passengers. After 4 weeks of building pressures, the controller shortage spiked and remained elevated through the remainder of the shutdown. I'll leave it to Nick here to describe a lot of the strains felt by each of those individuals and their families, but understandably, it was clear that the system that was understaffed and antiquated before the shutdown was now overwhelmed. On November 6th, the FAA released Order Number 1, outlining the required airspace reductions starting at 4% with the idea that it would build to 10% of forced cancellations in about a week. And these numbers may not sound like a lot, but for airline operations that require crew placement, management, asset placement, moving the actual airplanes to get them into position and repositioned, and then dealing with all the customer service demands that inevitably will result from such cancellations, it really became a 24-hour nonstop logistical nightmare for the airlines themselves. Just 3 days later, the number of delays had dropped, but the cancellations increased had skyrocketed, not to 4, but to well over 10%. And cancellations themselves increased from about 140 around November 5th to 2,800, 20 times that in just 4 or 5 days. Luckily, the Senate passed the continuing resolution less than a week after the initial order. But believe me when I tell you that while safety was always maintained through the shutdown, there were discussions within the industry that in order to ensure that level of safety, which is absolutely required, much larger portions of the American commercial fleet may have to be grounded because logistically it just wouldn't have been possible to keep meeting those cancellation requirements. So what did this cost us? And by us, I don't mean the airlines. I mean, what did this cost America? The airlines themselves are taking a hit of about $50 million a day, just in the potential refunds to cancel passengers. But more importantly, the American economy was feeling all of these dominoes fall. And when you add the impact to airlines and hotels and restaurants and rentals, the low estimate we found says that the flight cancellation impact was close to $500 million per day by November 10th. And for the entirety of their shutdown, some estimates are clocking it at a $20 billion hit to America's GDP. So how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? First, it's as it was outlined here. Congress has to pass the Transportation Homeland Security appropriation bills, a minimum first step that's critical for all airspace functions. Second, Senator Moran's Aviation Funding Stability Act will pay for FAA during times of government shutdown. It's a public-private partnership, and we appreciate his leadership to ensure that the government is living up to its responsibility to the American public. And third, we're grateful for the first $12.5 billion, but there's another $19 billion that absolutely has to come. Modernization is absolutely key, but you can't just put in one piece of the puzzle. The whole thing has to be there, and so to ensure those funds are there are going to be critical to making sure that, again, we don't have a lasting problem in America's airspace. Thank you.
Mr. Viola.
Senator Moran, Senator Duckworth, and members of the Subcommittee on Aviation, Space, and Innovation. Thank you for inviting me to testify regarding the impact of the recent government shutdown on the aviation sector. GAMA is privileged to represent companies that continuously modernize and improve existing aircraft fleet and are working on new aircraft and new technologies that will transform aviation. I want to acknowledge the dedication and sacrifice of the FAA employees and others who are responsible for the safety and the security of the aviation sector. They have conducted themselves commendably despite multiple missed paychecks and job uncertainty. As a former FAA employee, I saw firsthand how difficult shutdowns are for the agency and the workforce, and I know they are not easily recovered from. The shutdown limited the FAA to conducting essential activities only, which are those necessary to protect life and property, or required by law. As the shutdown continued, the FAA recognized that the delays in oversight and design approval certification activities were increasing and delaying U.S. development of product improvements and safety-enhancing technologies, and the leadership began to call back more of the workforce inside the FAA to conduct additional safety oversight and limited certification activities. Nevertheless, the shutdown significantly disrupted important activities of the FAA, including areas that this Congress prioritized during the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, such as FAA workforce growth and development, FAA certification activities, and the support of U.S. technologies and innovation. The most important impact of the 2025 government shutdown on manufacturers is that they saw no new certification projects or other applications were allowed to start. Even with the shutdown's end now, the FAA will be unable to act upon all those new applications immediately, which will likely take months before they can get at them. The FAA certification and safety workforce, recruiting, skills enhancement, and training initiatives were also severely impacted by the shutdown. We are very concerned about approximately 600 engineers, pilots, inspectors, and technical specialists that AVS was actively hiring when the shutdown began on October 1st. These candidates were left in limbo and may now decide not to pursue federal employment. The shutdown also resulted in missed opportunities to advance U.S. leadership in global international aviation forums that support U.S. aviation standards and technology. It also delayed critical safety oversight functions like flight testing, and those will require months to reschedule. Another area of continued impact is rulemaking, again, including many directed by the 2024 Reauthorization Act in areas like aviation safety, cybersecurity, certification modernization, and drone detect and avoid technology. These issues underscore the importance of Congress acting quickly now to pass the fiscal year 2026 Transportation, Housing, Urban Development Appropriations Bill. Passage will provide the needed stability to an agency and allow for key investments in the workforce, modernization, and aviation safety. We strongly support Senator Moran's Aviation Funding Stability Act to avoid effects of future shutdowns, as well as the legislation introduced by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Chair Graves and Ranking Member Larson and others to address these issues. We appreciate these initiatives and will stand ready to work with everyone to find the best path forward. In wake of the accident at DCA, the aviation industry came together to form the Modern Skies Coalition to focus on air traffic modernization and staffing issues. The shutdown was counterproductive to these modernization and staffing efforts. Like the aviation safety and regulatory issues I discussed earlier, we must all work to regain that momentum on these modernization priorities. It is a national imperative. GAMA appreciates the opportunity to share the manufacturers industry's perspectives today, and I look forward to working with members of this subcommittee on efforts to improve the strength and operation of the FAA. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Viola. Ms. Sprickler, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Aviation Subcommittee Chair Moran and Aviation Subcommittee Ranking Member Duckworth, thank you for holding this hearing and for inviting me to be here today. Senator Moran, it was really nice to meet you in the airport yesterday. My name is Eileen Spickler, and I live in Ottawa, Kansas, with my husband, Barry, who is here with me today. We moved to Kansas 7 years ago from Gaithersburg, Maryland, to be closer to Barry's kids and grandkids. Being here has been a blessing and has allowed us to watch the grandchildren grow up. I would like to sit here and tell you that we were affected by the many airport delays and canceled flights that were happening around the country. I have nothing but the utmost respect for the hardworking TSA agents, air traffic controllers, and others who worked overtime during the shutdown. The truth is that Barry and I cannot afford to travel right now. We would love to be able to visit friends and family, but the cost of a flight is just completely unfathomable to us right now. We are barely scraping by and struggling to afford our basic needs, and our health care costs keep going up each year. The only way we could be here today is due to the support of Families USA, and I want to thank Senator Duckworth's office for inviting us to share our story. My husband, Barry, retired in June of 24 after 15 years of working as a government contractor for the Food and Drug Administration and after nearly 50 years in the workforce. Barry's retirement came earlier than we intended at age 63 because the budget for his FDA contract was cut. As a remote worker, Barry was embarked for layoff because he could not report in person to Maryland. That's when our financial troubles really started, and it's been nearly impossible to keep our head above water ever since. Barry runs a guitar booth at a local antique store and hosts weekly jam sessions for fellow musicians. He no longer has employer-sponsored health insurance, so in June of 24, we enrolled Barry in health insurance, joining the 200,000 Kansans on the ACA marketplace. Since enrolling in ACA coverage, Barry has undergone treatment for 2 kidney stones, one of them life-threatening, and received numerous MRIs, CT scans, and x-rays that have all been covered by insurance. His plan is not perfect, and the cost of copays, premiums, and prescriptions have gone up each year, but the monthly payments have been affordable enough with the tax credits, and it has allowed Barry to get the care he needs. In 2025, we paid $109 a month, and we received almost $1,200 per month in subsidies. If it weren't for the premium tax credits, we would not have been able to afford insurance for Barry at all. And honestly, I don't know where we'd be, or if we'd even be sitting here before you. Access to affordable health insurance is life and death for us. In 2026, our plan is going up 125% from $109 to $246 a month. Because of this increase, and with the tax credit set to expire, we have decided not to enroll Barry in coverage for next year, and he will go uninsured until March when he is eligible for Medicare. At our age, and with Barry's health issues, I'm terrified that in these 2 months, we could be faced with a health emergency we can't afford and will end up buried in a mountain of medical debt. For the first time in our lives, we wait in line every other week at food pantries because that's the only way to afford our groceries. Earlier this week, the line in Ottawa was twice as long as it ever had been with an almost 3-hour wait. We are so grateful for the Affordable Care Act because it has made it possible for us to survive on as little as we have right now. We are about $100 a month over the poverty limit for Medicaid because Kansas is one of 10 states that has not expanded Medicaid. I am a cancer survivor. I'm an aggressive cancer with a high likelihood of recurrence, and I'm still in treatment 9 years later. I receive disability benefits and Medicare. The peace of mind of knowing that we both have affordable health insurance is everything to me. But these last few weeks, knowing we're facing a gap in Barry's insurance for next year is terrifying for us both. Our story is unique, but we are not alone. There are 22 million Americans that use the premium tax credits to help them stay on health coverage. I am here fighting for my family and for the millions more who know the struggle of fighting to afford basic needs like health care. Health care is a human right. Nobody should go without it. And what is the point of having a health care plan if you can't afford to use it? I hope you will remember my story and take immediate action because we cannot afford to wait. Thank you for your time and for the chance to tell my story.
For telling your story, and is it planted in your senator's mind? Thank you. Let me see where to start with my questioning. Let's start with you, Mr. Sununu. Many Kansans will travel for the holiday. What do the airlines expect to be the circumstances those Kansans and Americans will face?
As we go into the holiday, it's going to be full. It's going to be packed. The airlines are ready. The air traffic controllers are back. The skies are safe. So that's the great news. We want everyone to feel confident, first and foremost, about booking travel. But it'll be near record numbers, which is great. Looking into the Christmas season, we're hoping that those bookings pick up a little bit. I think some of the stories in October and some of the just the politics around what was happening at the airlines scared a few people off, so we want them to know more than anything that while it is going to be busy, the airlines and the system is ready. And it's more affordable than ever before, right? It's a better customer experience than ever before, more affordable domestically than ever before, more reliable now that we're out of the shutdown. And as an industry, we're looking to that end of January mark. That's the thing that scares us the most. But right now, we feel very confident about where things are and where they should be through the holidays.
Mr. Daniels, what can we expect in the air traffic control world?
Well, one of the things that I think this shutdown showed time and time again is the unfortunate reality of where the air traffic control system is, which is we operate with 25% less than the required essential employees. We operate with 10,800 certified professional controllers where there should be 14,633. Any profession that had a 25% reduction in their essential workers would be screaming for help. But yet, these men and women every day shoulder the responsibility and burden of moving the most planes in the history of the world, especially through this shutdown in 7 weeks of uncertainty. So we'll do what we do every day. We'll show up, we'll keep America safe, we'll keep the skies moving, and we're looking forward to getting back on track to the long-term commitment to hiring and training the next generation controllers and fixing the equipment that is antiquated and needs to be done.
Mr. Daniels, you highlighted this subcommittee's and the full committee and actually the Congress's efforts to engage and further employ air traffic controllers. Part of that involves training, as you mentioned in Oklahoma City. What's the circumstances in the academy in Oklahoma City with students who want to be air traffic controllers? The academy did not close during the shutdown, as I understand it, but were students there, and is there a line still waiting to become air traffic controllers?
There is still a line waiting. NACA absolutely commends Secretary Duffy, Administrator Bedford for finding a way to keep the Oklahoma City Academy open for our first time in history. It's also important to note that air traffic controllers not only took on the added stress and pressure, the fatigue that comes with the shutdown, the uncertainty, but they were also training the entire shutdown. But for our first time in history, we saw people start resigning out of the academy, saying, you know what, I can't afford to pass the Oklahoma City Academy, move hundreds if not thousands of miles to one of the most high cost of living areas in America, which are near our major airports, to pick up a career in a profession that's not going to pay me, and I have no idea when. And they started to resign. And not only their resignations, but also controllers in mid-career started resigning, saying, enough's enough, I have to go find a job that has more stability than this.
Mr. Viola, I think you probably represent the opportunity to talk about an area that's not necessarily thought about during the circumstances we've been through, and that's the certification process by which we advance aviation's technology and capabilities, and we build and produce more airplanes to fill the fleet. Tell us in your words what it is that was not occurring during the shutdown that matters to the safety and well-being of the flying public, as well as what it means to our ability to compete in a global economy.
So as new technologies are certified to get onto aircraft, the ability to get those new projects into the FAA to start that process to get them on board the aircraft. So the modernization of aircraft would be one thing. And then the fact that everything just kind of shifts and the rescheduling of the activities with the FAA to do those new projects, the new technology bases to be a leader in the aviation community.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Daniels, you noted that for the first time in history, and you just said you commend Secretary Duffy and FAA Administrator for finding a way to keep the Air Traffic Controller Academy open and keep training. In your conversations with them during the shutdown, did you ask them to find a way to also pay air traffic controllers since they found a way to keep the academy going?
I did not specifically have that request of them during it, but it was loud and clear that paying air traffic controllers is essential.
So it was, you commend them for keeping their academies going, but you didn't actually ask them to pay the air traffic controllers. I mean, if DOD, if FAA can continue hiring and training air traffic controllers because of failing to do so would risk the imminent loss of life or loss of personal property, surely there's a case to be made for paying air traffic controllers from reprogrammed funds or even donations from industry. I mean, if DOD can use funds that Congress authorized and appropriate for R&D and not salaries and expenses, along with accepting a billionaire's donation of over $100 million to pay military men and women, what stops FAA from following suit and reprogramming funds from accounts like the Airport and Airways Trust Fund to pay air traffic controller salaries or solicit donations from industry? Did you have a conversation about using those funds to pay the air traffic controllers, which I would have supported?
I did not have a specific conversation as what you're referencing, but I'll put my request on record from now and in the future. I welcome any chance to pay air traffic controllers for the work that they're doing, and they should never go uncompensated for the work that's being done or used as a political pawn in a political dispute.
I think that's what's happening today, is that you're being used as a political pawn. When this hearing was advised, it was called the damage of the democratic shutdown. I have been the strongest supporter of air traffic controllers. I think you should have been paid. I think that we should have caught up Senator Moran's bill, Senator Cruz's bill. We could have passed it and you should have been paid. It is unconscionable that we had at least one death by suicide that I heard of an air traffic controller in the shutdown. This is not acceptable in our nation. But what is happening today is political theater to use you guys as pawns to score points post-shutdown. I would rather we be talking about what we need to do to get, for example, Mrs. Sununu, the data that Secretary Duffy talked about that was forthcoming for why he needed to do the slowdowns. I think we all would like to see that data. None of us have seen it. I think we should be talking about passing these pieces of legislation in a bipartisan way. We should not be scoring political points, but we are here now. So since we are here, I'm gonna talk about why we had a shutdown in the first place, which is healthcare. Let me just ask our witness, Ms. Spickler, as a cancer survivor yourself, how do you feel about Republican proposals that would revive high-risk pools and largely seek to promote schemes that lower health insurance premiums by giving young and healthy Americans junk plans in exchange for permission to screw over Americans with pre-existing conditions, disabilities, and other serious medical conditions?
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I remember what it was like before the ACA was passed, and it was horrible. When I was in my 30s, I went twice without health insurance. I could not afford it. I was getting medication from Canada until the whole donut hole thing started, which, anyways, yeah, and I don't agree with it because I lived it. This is my lived experience, and I don't want to be a political pawn either. What I am dealing with is just as important as air safety. And so I don't understand why it has to be so bipolar. Why can't it be both and instead of either or? They are equally important. They both need to be addressed. And stealing money from one to pay billionaires is not fair. That is, none of this is fair. And I don't even know if I'm going off topic or not, but I
you're
would,
very
I
much on
qual,
topic.
I did not, I could not, I had pre-existing conditions and I could not qualify for any kind of affordable plan. It was like $1,200 and that was 30 years ago, a month.
You're right, we should not be pitting air traffic controllers against the healthcare affordability for Americans. And that's not the purpose of this committee. The purpose of this committee is, and the subcommittee is air traffic safety. And that's what we should be focused on. So let's stop with the games. We can focus on what we need to do to move forward, but let's remember how we got here, but also remember who championed you
Yes.
during the FAA reauthorization. I did. I was the biggest supporter of air traffic controllers. And to come in here and act like you don't remember any of that is offensive to me. I yield back.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Daniels, thank you for your testimony and what you shared in terms of the struggles and the challenges that air traffic controllers and others faced. I had the chance to talk on the phone with some air traffic controllers from New Jersey and during the shutdown, and I'll tell you that, they were telling me just, that they felt like they were pawns, is the words that they said. They felt like they were taken for granted. It was really hard hearing just the emotion in their voice. And I'll be honest with you, they were livid at what they were seeing in terms of Capitol Hill. I mean, they were straight up telling me that why do they have to show up to work and not get paid when, frankly, the House of Representatives wasn't even in session for this entirety of the shutdown, and members of Congress are getting paid. And one thing that I kept hearing was this idea of feeling that, members of Congress, the president are getting paid, that we're playing with other people's chips, that we don't feel it ourselves. And this is something that I felt very personally too. I was a career civil servant in the federal government. I worked through shutdowns before without getting paid. And I know what it's like to just feel like those that are on Capitol Hill don't care about what's happening to us. This is just a little political game for them. And that's why, I've always refused to take my salary during shutdowns while I've been up here on the Hill. A small token of symbolism here, but one that I think is important. You said something that stuck out to me, and I appreciated it. You said no American should work without a paycheck, right, in your testimony?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah. So, look, I certainly agree with the others in this room that we should make sure that our air traffic controllers are continuing to get paid no matter what the circumstances are. But can I take from that comment of yours that you would support legislation that would ensure that all government employees can continue to get their paycheck regardless of the circumstances?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Absolutely. Air traffic controllers and all federal employees deserve to be paid.
I think that's really important as we're talking this through. And certainly I understand the strains that air traffic controllers are facing. When I was an officer at the State Department, I know I had colleagues working in harm's way in Afghanistan and elsewhere that were not getting their paychecks. And it's just about duty. I mean, like, no one would tolerate a private company forcing workers to show up for work and saying, you'll get your paycheck maybe some other time. And I think that that's something that I just hope we can keep in mind here. Mr. Daniels, you also talked about how there's been a call for a long time for increased controller staffing. This is something I just hear year after year, I mean, and the challenges that we continue to face. And the shutdown certainly exposes that fragility, but we saw in New Jersey as well that some of the problems that we had with the radar scopes and other things earlier this year were causing challenges when it came to staffing because of just the difficulty and the strain that people were in, whether at the Philly TradeCon or elsewhere. So I guess I just wanted to just hear from you, how do we try to build up and close that delta that you were talking about in terms of the staffing shortages? I know there are a number of ideas that have been out there, but can you really try to help us kind of articulate for the American people, what are the things that we need to do to stop kicking the can down the road and actually be able to take steps to be able to build up the kind of resilience that we need when it comes to our air traffic controllers?
I appreciate the question, Senator Kim, and for the support of air traffic controllers and the modernization of air traffic. But when it specifically comes to the training of air traffic controllers, we often look for some quick fix when the real solution and the real answer is a long-term commitment to the hiring and training of the next generation of air traffic controllers. And we're absolutely not taking a side in this. We absolutely thank Senator Duckworth, the leadership of this committee, for ensuring that that language prevails and that that's what the standard is held today, is that long-term commitment and not trying to find another way around it. But it's also going to come from ensuring that we have the training tools and resources, which is also, again, in the FAA reauthorization bill, of the different simulators that reduces training time by up to 27% for our facilities. So it's having that investment, the money's there, now we actually have to be able to use it, and the government shutdown absolutely installed that, but now we can get back on track.
Yeah, though, I mean, look, one thing I keep hearing over and over again in terms of the challenges of recruitment is about instability. And like I said, you know, I've experienced this firsthand when I was a civil servant. I was working there at the State Department, the Pentagon, during the 2013 sequestration fight, you know, watching how the Republicans at that time were pushing these budget cuts and how that had years worth of ramifications. So I just share that. Mrs. Spickler, I don't have time to be able to ask a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for coming and sharing your story. It is a story, unfortunately, that I heard echoes of exactly the same across New Jersey. I will promise you, I will keep fighting for you, your family, for all of these families. Even though, you know, the shutdown's over, we know that the struggles that you and others are facing continue. So we're going to continue to get to work there. Thank you, and with that, I'll yield back.
Senator Capito.
Senator Breathless Capito over here. Thank you for being here. And I think really the last 6 or 7 weeks have been extremely miserable for you and in the American public, and it's been miserable up here at the United States Senate too. So I don't know if that's any consolation, but it certainly is. Let me ask you something that I think happens when things like this happen, which are obviously rare, but certainly air service in rural areas is so challenged. Service has been cut. I'll just say your flights are going out at 5 in the morning or coming in at 11 o'clock at night. And so the fear, I think, is as we head towards, when we look at shortages of air traffic controllers and other stresses and strains, I mean, how do you view this? I guess, Mr. Daniels, this would be for you. How do you view this from the air traffic control perspective in something like a shutdown or something where there's a slowdown in the economy? Where do you see the difference of the impacts between urban and rural America in terms of air service and availabilities? And how do your people look at that, your air traffic controllers?
Well, first, thank you for the question, Senator. The impact of the shutdown does one of many things. The disruption, the stress, the fatigue, the absolute uncertainty that it brings air traffic controllers to not be 100% focused on the job where they have to be perfect. They have to be 100%, 100% of the times. That increases risk in our system and something that we continuously advocate for, and why we support Senator Moran's bill, Senator Cruz's bill, to ensure that we're not part of these shutdowns in the future. But it also, as far as the difference in markets, what you're getting to see is what we deal with every single day. And that's operate a system with less than 25% of its essential workforce. 3,800 certified controllers short, and on any given day, one absence, one person not being able to make it, additional stress and additional fatigue absolutely impacts America and the flying public.
Well, that kind of leads me to it. Thank you for that. My second question, Governor, it's nice to see you. Essential air service is what we rely on, not in all of our airports, but certainly several of them. Where do you see the, because we do rely so much on it, how important is that to your membership, Governor?
That's huge.
For
Yeah.
essential air service.
Sorry,
Can
no,
you
it's-
talk about that during the shutdown and how that
Sure.
might have been
So,
impacted?
you know, the regional hub service, the system, as we have with major carriers having hubs and then the regionals kind of pouring into there, as Mr. Daniels identified, some of the issues are around workforce, right? You got to have the workforce, whether it's in the towers or the pilots or the training programs in those rural areas to support that. The aircraft themselves, they tend to be a little bit smaller. You got to make sure that there's investment in the technologies there. You know, as was identified, one of the biggest impacts of the shutdown where things weren't getting certified. Equipment and technologies weren't getting certified, and so that's critical. You don't want to leave those regional and those rural areas behind. I can say that when it did come to the area of cancellations, that was a tough conversation. We're always talking to the FAA. We have a great collaboration and a great working relationship with them. When it came to some of those looking preliminarily at what these cancellations would mean, to their credit, the FAA said, look, we're not just shutting down rural areas because they're a little less not the highlights, if you will. So they really took care to make sure in understanding that while these impacts were going to be big across the country, they had to be evenly distributed. It couldn't just be the main, the main lines get to be maintained and the regionals get hit. So the shutdown was tough, but I think everyone tried to make every effort to make sure that where pullback had to happen, it happened to happen evenly with an understanding that rural areas always kind of are the first ones to get hit, and they wanted to be cognizant of that.
Okay, let me just throw this up to whoever wants to answer. One thing I was sort of wondering about. We put a lot of money into modernizing the air traffic control, the technologies behind it. I mean, we're way behind on this, but we did put a lot of money in the One Big Beautiful Bill to get a good head start on that. Do you think the testimony or the impacts on our air service and our aviation systems, if we had that system fully operational, the new system that we want, would there be any difference in the conversation we're having today? And I guess Mr. I can't say.
I'll take the first stab at it,
Daniels, why
Senator.
don't you take that? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the number one impact you see is the backbone of that system is the hardworking men and women, the true American patriots that do that.
I get that.
And yes, we would absolutely see a difference because if we had a full workforce with modernized equipment, we would not see near as many disruptions.
Okay, so question being is, does that system work without a full amount of people working on it?
No system will overcome the
Okay.
hardworking men and women.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, did you want to say something?
No, I would just add that it's all about efficiency, allowing those technologies, the speed at which controllers could potentially get trained, the ubiquitous nature where one tower doesn't have one system and another tower has another system. It would allow folks to move around in an emergency situation. So that first $12 billion is great. The next $19 billion is critical, and the technologies you're going to see in this country are absolutely amazing and going to make the whole system work, not for just the airlines, work for 350 million Americans that rely on it, and all the air traffic controllers that are completely strained by it.
Yeah, and I would add really the world, because people are flying here and around here all the time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Capito, thank you. I'd highlight for our committee members and maybe the audience that we are working to have a hearing in November that involves the Secretary of Transportation and/or the FAA administrator to talk about the amount of money that's been made available, the amount of lack of money that's been made available, and to see where we are in the modernization effort. And we hope we were unsuccessful during the shutdown to get the federal employee witnesses to be here. And we're had postponed that hearing and hoping it occurs in November. Senator Sheehy.
Thanks for being here, everyone. We all are focused on the airlines generally, ATC slowdowns and airline delays and how that derives, economically from that. But I think another piece of these, the manning shortage that came from the shutdown, but also are impacted writ large, is our FAA oversight PMOs, DPEs, folks who work within the FAA structure that allow small operators like 135 operators, 137, 133, the folks who are doing organ transportation, who are doing air ambulance, medical evacuation, who are crop dusting, who are doing aviation maintenance in a Part 145 repair station. They require access to their FAA oversight bodies and their local FSDOs and ACOs to continue operating for pilot checks, for periodic maintenance inspections. And when that oversight is not available, either those companies are operating under an extended period of a waiver, or they're just not getting the oversight and safety inspection that is required by law. So I'd be curious as your thoughts on that and what you're hearing from operators, either as manufacturers, Mr. Viola, or smaller 135, 137 operators in the field.
Well, thank you for that question. I'll take the first run at it. Well, certainly the oversight of the designated pilot examiners as well as the DARs out there that are trying to get new certification, or STCs out there, delayed some of that getting to the field. And then, with the FSDOs having to, try to figure out what it was it can do, what it was that was important to get back from the leadership, and getting that out to employee has been difficult. The challenges of the workforce, it fits back into the workforce of the FAA, and not having that stable funding and not having to know, what is going on with the training in other areas. So that's why we certainly support any action that will pay the FAA during any of these government shutdowns, so that we can keep that oversight going, so we can keep the momentum going. And as was mentioned, the modernization that we're trying to do with $12.5 million or $1 billion now, we still look forward to trying to get that whole system in place with the additional $30 billion, so that everything that we do here in the United States can operate more effectively and efficiently for the taxpayers.
No, the only thing I would add is, when we were talking about the aspects of what happened during the shutdown, when we talk about whether it's the cancellations or the delays, to your point, I think very importantly, the new way of healthcare in this country is everything from using broadband and telehealth to getting your pharmaceuticals shipped to you, to getting your home healthcare, your home dialysis, whatever it might be. So when we see pullback, that happens to our cargo carriers that we represent, the FedExes, the UPSs, the Atlas. That means that those delays happen. And as a lot of folks know, just a day or two delay on things that have to be overnighted for healthcare in the home, it's not just out of the hospital anymore. When these things have huge effects on how healthcare is delivered nowadays, and just an important aspect that it wasn't just the passengers that were affected, the carriers, they're delivering organs, delivering people to vital healthcare, to hospital, but also that everyday use. The FedEx, UPS, they all had to pull back to those same levels, and it hurt. It caused a lot of delays everywhere.
Well, there's already been a challenged infrastructure with regard to the aviation employment sphere. I mean, we can't get enough pilots, mechanics, controllers. This is pre-shutdown. This has nothing to do with shutdown. We've already had a challenge in making sure we have appropriate manning, both in the FAA as an agency, but also across the board in the private industry. And then when something like this happens and kind of throwing fuel on the fire, especially in rural areas with essential air service access, and where we have towers that are at half manning across a lot of the Mountain West as those towns are growing so fast and air travel's growing there. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Sheehy, thank you. We're pleased to have the ranking member of the full committee, Senator
Thank you.
Sorry to say Capito, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and to the ranking member for holding this important hearing and for our witnesses being here. We have obviously made air traffic control staffing a major priority in the last aviation bill, and we are continuing to make it a major priority. I want an FAA who does slow down traffic when they think it's necessary, as exhibited by the very unfortunate tragedy that we had at DCA. So I hope that we'll continue to close safety gaps, and I hope we will continue to invigorate air traffic controllers. I think the question that we have, maybe for you, Mr. Sununu or Mr. Daniels, last year when we required the FAA to set a maximum hiring target through FY 2028 to maximize training capacity for controllers, it would require the FAA to do this for 5 years through 2033. Do you support and agree that we must ensure that FAA continues its maximum controller hiring for at least the next 10 consecutive years, and that the FAA is then in a better position to offset retirements? So either Mr. Daniels first and then Mr. Sununu.
First, great to see you, Senator, and thank you for the support, especially when it comes to FAA reauthorization and the SAFE Act in the shared airspace. We would truly appreciate that. As far as it goes, yes, it absolutely needs to be the long-term commitment to the hiring and training of the next generation of air traffic controllers. And that 10 years is critical for us to not only modernize the system, but ensure that air traffic controllers have a full staffing complement to take on the next generation of aviation, which is going to be through autonomous vehicles, drones, and otherwise. And that's going to be a new challenge that presents itself, but this workforce will be ready and up for it as long as the commitment stays there to ensure that they have all the bodies that are needed.
Thank you.
And I would just add 100%. I mean, and making sure that they're funded and paid and all that, that should be the low bar. I think making sure that you don't disincentivize people from coming into the industry, as Mr. Daniel was highlighting earlier, not just when seeing folks walk away from the academy during the shutdown. How do you go into a high school and encourage someone who's about to graduate to get excited about aviation, get excited about the industry when the headline every single day is you don't get paid? So I think the concern is not just did we see negative effects over the last 6 weeks, but that is going to have, unfortunately, negative reverberations unless we jump on top of the messaging. We ensure the American public that not just the appropriation bill that we're looking at moves forward, but Senator Moran's bill is real. Everyone gets behind it. We make sure that this just cannot happen again, because otherwise the uncertainty added to the system could be really detrimental for years to come.
I have two more questions for you. So one, did the airlines comply with what the secretary requested?
Oh yeah, look, the airlines made every good faith effort. In those first days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I think they had to meet a 4% cancellation. I think on Sunday we were over 10 because it was such a logistics
You think
nightmare.
there's data that shows that? There's data that shows that?
Yeah, they were over 10%. I think, I can pick individual. I think Delta at one point hit 16% the following Monday, something like that. And what they realized is, you know what, if they had to hit, let's say 4 or 6%, I think Monday it hit 6%, they realized, okay, we're gonna plan for a few percent below that. Why? Because it could be a maintenance issue or a weather issue, just the natural other cancellations. They realized they had to kind of build in to the calculus so they didn't over cancel. And then as the week went on, it wasn't just, well, just take that one flight down. Well, when you take the flight from Boston to Washington down, that means the Washington, Kansas City to LA, and LA back to Chicago flights can't happen either. So moving the assets around, consolidating those customers, and the crews, because there's laws and regulations and protections around those crews. A crew from a 737 can't jump in a 787. The flight crew from that flight can't just jump on that one because they need a break. They need time off, so it got very complex.
Yeah, it's very complex, but I am interested in some analysis of this and some information because I think we might have also found some optimization of the system. And I do think that we push sometimes to get maximum, like the DCA. I'm sure we'll hear from NTSB in January about the flow of traffic into DCA the night of the crash. And was there too much flow and should it have been slower? And then the warning bells that basically air traffic controllers had said went off for months and months and months unheeded because there was too much going on. So I am curious if we ended up actually having like optimization, like if we had more on-time flight arrivals because we weren't pushing it, we were actually, the system can be optimized at a certain level of service delivery. Now, that isn't a moneymaker that isn't like maximizing profits to the nth degree, but there probably is a system that is calibrated in the right way to make sure that you have more on-time performance and certainly on the safety side. I want to ask you about, you guys, A4A, and I know you're new at this and we welcome you in that capacity. We are encouraged by the Department of Transportation reviewing unnecessary burden regulations exceeding their authority. I'm talking about this issue of our authority directed to DOT to take care of secondary rules, secondary costs on hotels and meals. What happened is the Southwest meltdown left my constituents, the Rainier Beach basketball team, Coach Bethea, his wife, had to pay thousands of dollars of out-of-pocket expenses. You remember the meltdown that winter, and they were stuck in Las Vegas, had to pay all these out-of-pocket expenses. So we said, let's not have this happen again, and let's come up with rules for secondary cost in these situations. And so I think the administration is trying to scrap that consumer product rule. I'm saying that's a bad idea. You need to do it. But it seems like A4A is cheerleading them.
Yeah, so if we're talking about two things. Number one, I do want to address is there a system where everything can be optimized? There absolutely is, and it costs $31.5 billion, and we appreciate the first $12.5 billion. The technologies with that next $19 billion are going to be absolutely phenomenal. You're talking about efficiency, more Americans traveling, safer. It'll be amazing, and so I think everyone appreciates that. On the deregulation aspects, yeah, there's no doubt some regulations have come into play in the last 4 years or so, kind of prior to 2025, that frankly didn't make any sense, not for the industry, but even for the consumer. They were punitive. They would have raised cost on the consumer. There were instances where the industry was going to have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for act of God type situations. And we simply said, look, every law and every rule that's on the books, we always comply to on the consumer protection side. We never
Do you
overlook
want-
that.
Did you want this rolled back, is what I'm asking. Are you asking this rule that came into effect, we all wrote it here and said, put this in the bill, that have the administration think of these secondary costs and have a rulemaking on it, because it is complex. I mean, what happened was far more than just a winter meltdown. Some airlines were better prepared to address the concerns of constituents and give them information about when they might be able to get on a flight and how they might be able to get home. And then other airlines were very ill prepared because they never invested in the technology.
Yeah.
And that was the frustration, so.
No, I would simply say, I think the concern is having those rules in place is very important, making sure we're not creating one-size-fits-all structures based on that one winter storm, which was devastating. As you pointed out, some airlines did it very well, some airlines didn't. There was a lot of complexity in it. We just want to make sure that the rules are there and they fit the need of the moment, and they're not so broad-based that they crush the consumer with higher costs.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, one more, I don't see any of my colleagues waiting in line here on either side, so thank you. We have a bunch of people here with us today. And we've tried to deal with this issue 2 or 3 times, and it's really frustrating. The people who are ramp workers at airports clean our planes. They help with the security of the system. They are part of the aviation system. We tried during COVID to help them and met with huge opposition, even though we worked very hard in about 25 days to come up with a plan to help the airline industry survive during COVID. We tried in the last FAA authorization bill to also resolve the issue. And the issue is these people, they're not falling through the cracks when it comes to cleaning the planes and servicing our airports and taking people in wheelchairs and getting them to locations. They're not falling, they're doing their job. But everybody acts like they are an island where they just appeared somewhere. They're not. They're part of this ecosystem. They are part of the aviation ecosystem, and they deserve to have health care. I do not want them coming on a plane sick. The whole point of getting on the plane, trying to make it not an unhealthy environment, why do you want the plane cleaned by people who are sick? So will you commit to work with me to find a solution to resolve this issue and help us get some compensation for the healthcare workers that are only people at the airport? Everybody else, flight attendants, stewards, people who work in the coffee shop, everybody else in this entire system has healthcare, but these people, and everybody dodges it because they think that it's not their problem. But they are part of the delivery system and they deserve healthcare. Will you work with me on this?
Yeah, look, in terms of the healthcare issue, obviously it's a giant issue, and it doesn't affect the airline industry. It affects 350 million Americans, of course. So, but I'm here to represent the airlines and making sure that the airlines are safe, they're moving on time, that we don't get caught in the political side of things, and not the airlines, that the American public doesn't get caught on the political side of things. But those discussions have to happen. Those solutions have to be brought to bear. On the healthcare side.
It's not the political side. They are part of the a plane can't just come and land without somebody cleaning it, okay? Sure. The airport and that sector work together to try to have the security team, the cleaning team, the maintenance team, everybody have a robust system. So I think what happens here is everybody points the finger to somebody else that, oh, there are contract workers. So there are contract workers, so we don't have to provide health care. And
well, I would say, if I may, for those workers, they obviously don't work directly for the airlines per se, but if there are contractors or
they are contracted through airlines.
Yeah, and
that's the issue. And then the contractors don't deliver the care.
Yeah, and I would look to their unions as well. I mean, a lot of them are represented by unions, and I would imagine that they need to make sure that they're incorporating that thing. But yeah, we're part of the big ecosystem, and we know we're the big dogs.
You will work with me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, anything further? I have a couple of questions.
Well, if you're going to do second round, I'll do some as well.
If you want to, you can.
Okay.
Please.
Oh,
You go and I'll wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the days leading up to the Trump administration issuing an emergency order mandating a significant reduction in flights, separate and apart from restrictions triggered by ATC staffing shortages. The Trump administration claimed that this order was dictated by data. As Secretary Duffy stated, and I quote, "The data will dictate what we are going to do, data-driven, safety-driven," end quote. Now, the irony is that under normal circumstances, nobody would cheer louder than me for evidence of FAA changing its culture to be more proactive in using real-time safety data and, most importantly, making tough decisions to prevent deadly incidents. That is why the Trump administration's failure to transparently disclose the data underlying its emergency order, combined with Secretary Duffy's overt threats to ramp up flight restrictions unless Democrats rolled over and just voted for whatever plan Republicans proposed, was and remains deeply disappointing. It fails to strengthen confidence in good government, and the American people are understandably suspicious of a DOT and FAA that does not show its work. I have a fifth grader who I work with every day saying, "Honey, I know you're doing long division, but you need to show your work, otherwise your teacher thinks you use a calculator." Right now, frankly, the FAA's failure to respond to basic information requests from my office and the ranking member's office over the past few weeks does nothing to dispel accusations that the Trump administration weaponized our aviation industry against the American people to score partisan political points. In justifying its emergency order, FAA noted that voluntary safety reports submitted in October indicated that operators, presumably many employees of the air carriers that A4A represents, had concerns about the safety of the national airspace system, despite the mitigation measures that had been put in place. Governor Sununu, did any airlines proactively restrict flight volumes independent of staffing triggers, or even preemptively contact FAA to recommend that the agency consider emergency action along the lines of the emergency order that the FAA eventually issued? I know you're new to the
I don't believe that any of the carriers actually said we're going to cancel flights because of this, but to be clear, the carriers, the Airlines for America and the FAA were talking constantly about data, about what they're seeing, staffing triggers, hot spots, and I would note that what was interesting about this shutdown from the first day on October 1st all the way to the end, there was never consistency. It wasn't like the Northeast has a problem. It was one day it was in the West, one day it was in Newark, one day it was Burbank, one day it was Nashville. So it was very hard to manage. It was almost like playing whack-a-mole. But at no time did the carriers say, we have to take more flights out. They said, we just need to put more mitigation strategies in to ensure safety, which they did, resulting in the delays, and that's why the cancellations were well under 1% for the bulk of October till the pressures really built.
So in that emergency order, the FAA stated the agency had, and I quote, "observed evidence of increased stress on the national air traffic system and aviation safety data, particularly 40 high-traffic airports," which I think is what you're speaking to. Unfortunately, FAA did not provide further insight into precisely what evidence and what specific metrics it used to determine that emergency order was required to immediately halt flights at high-traffic airports. Did your members provide any data to FAA, or did they share any data to you behind that?
Well, the biggest
especially
piece,
at those 40, because I haven't seen it and I've been requesting it.
Well, the biggest piece of data is incredibly obvious, all the staffing callouts. The fact that that was increasing day by day by day, the fact that you had, I mean, Nick, you could probably give the more accurate data. On Halloween alone, the staffing triggers and callouts from just the morning to the afternoon skyrocketed. And then sometimes we'd see that go down, but Saturday was brutal, Sunday went down, Monday, Tuesday were, so the data that, at least that we were looking at, were those staffing triggers and callouts, and we were watching that hour by hour. And post Halloween, it really never went down. It was really, really tough. Beyond that, I mean, I'd have to refer to the FAA for any other data points, but those are the ones that we specifically were looking at. And then there were the close calls.
Where did you, and that data came to you from the FAA, or how did you get the call-out data on how many air traffic controllers?
We get that data literally hourly. There's a couple different services that we use. So we get morning, I can see what they call staffing triggers, and then that gets, again, Nick can probably give you more information, but that can get to actual potential shutdowns where the actual towers just don't become sustainable to be manned in terms of landing and not landing. And we had a couple instances there. And if I may, shortly before the FAA came to us and said, look, we may need to talk about forced cancellations, you had 3 or 4 close calls on the taxiways, physical close calls. So that was clearly of concern. And I'm not here to defend the FAA. They can defend themselves. But I think they said, look, to the point that was made earlier, we want to be preventative here. We're not going to wait for a tragedy or a crisis to happen. Let's be preventative and make sure we can keep the airspace viable. let's not be like, frankly, the rest of government and wait for a tragedy before we do something. They said, we're going to get ahead of it. And that was really tough for the airlines, but if you talk to the CEOs, they'll all say it was the right thing to do. Being safe and smart is always best, and staying ahead of it and being proactive. And those number of callouts were huge. Other data, I'd have to just refer to the FAA. But.
My problem is that there's like all this different call-out data. So I've been trying to get a hold of all of the data. And if you guys were getting specific data from the FAA, I want to see that because the FAA has not provided it. And at one point, Secretary Duffy said he was getting 56 retirements a day. That was a number he put out, which I've not seen that backed up anywhere. And if it is, then I would need to know that. I'm just deeply concerned that there is a nebulous term of the data, and we don't know what that is. And if we want to look towards the future and do better the next time and do better even now, we need to know what that data is, and we should be sharing that data. And it deeply concerns me that FAA is not actually sharing the same set of data with everyone so that we're operating off of the same sheet of music.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, the only thing we really looked at was those callouts. I don't mean to put Nick on the spot, but there's a couple different areas where I think you can see the actual number of callouts and the triggers. We subscribe to a system that gives us that data, but
But yet,
yeah.
Secretary Duffy put out a number that was not consistent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Just a couple of things to wrap up, at least in my thinking. You all have been kind to mention the bill I first introduced in 2019 in an earlier shutdown. This is not a unique circumstance. We've been through this before. Is there anything in that legislation, maybe I should explain for our audience that the Aviation Funding Stability Act is legislation that seeks to insulate the FAA in the event that there's a government shutdown. The bill authorizes the FAA to continue to draw from the Airport and Airway Trust Fund during a lapse in appropriations with no general fund contributions. The AATF generates sufficient revenues independently to sustain all agency programs, including air traffic control operations, staffing and training, aircraft certification, and other essential functions. Any of you have suggestions of how we might improve that legislation? Are there things that, and if you don't have an answer today, you're welcome to provide an answer later, but if we are able to pursue the passage of this legislation, what are we missing, or what have we erred in any way?
Chairman Moran will obviously work with you and Senator Duckworth on any changes to language, but we fully support it as written in anything or any legislation that prevents air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals from not getting paid during a government shutdown. So we're in full support of it as written currently, and if there's any other suggestions, we'll make sure they get to your office.
Thank you.
If I may add one thing, it's terrific, it's awesome. We really hope it passes like tomorrow, but and maybe even out of this committee's wheelhouse, understandably, TSA, CPB are also very important, and as was noted, other aspects that might not fall directly within the FAA structure, but are part of that national aviation ecosystem.
Good reminder, we need everyone at work. Yeah. Mr. Gallo?
Sir, I would say we strongly support the Aviation Funding Stability Act.
I wasn't really looking for that compliment, but it's helpful to be able to say that you do, and I appreciate that. You have both, you have highlighted two things, that legislation and then the importance of THUD and its appropriations process. I'd like to give you another opportunity as we are trying, as we speak, to clear holes that various senators have on appropriation bills. And the effort is to bring the defense appropriation bill to the floor with a vote this week, and then allow for other bills to be added, including the transportation appropriation bill. Tell us why it's important to pass an appropriation bill for the Department of Transportation in the arenas in which you work or represent.
We'll start with the Modern Skies Coalition, as we're a part of it, has done a great job of articulating the issues. Secretary Duffy has gone out as well, talking about the need for the changes to staffing, modernization. We share many of the same components and the same vision. The true answers that America is looking for, the American flying public, are these long-term commitments in these bills. and that they are bipartisan and that we're working together and that are supported by the entire aviation community and not just by one group, is that we're all coming together saying what makes this system better. And that's the true, I would say, value and importance of what's happening right now, is you have an entire community speaking in unison of what is needed instead of just one entity politicking for themselves. I think anything that is focused on continuing to ensure that that voice it is moved forward is the true answer that's going to bring the solutions that the American people want and deserve.
I would only add, it's obviously immensely critical in providing that confidence in the system. I think because the shutdown was so big, so impactful to the American public, folks are going to be watching. Maybe appropriations bills don't take headlines typically, but I think come mid-January, folks are going to be watching and saying, is this an industry we can count on? Is not just in terms of booking travel, but for the workforce aspects. All the things that Nick has been talking about, and God bless his teams for hitting on. We want to encourage that recruitment in, and it will, at a minimum, keep some confidence into the system. The one argument, I'm not arguing against it by any means, is that it only goes till maybe mid-26, something like that. So we're going to be back in this pickle again a little bit, which is why I'll call it your follow-on bill on aviation funding is so critical, because it really makes sure that regardless of which side, what the politics are today or 10 years from now, the aviation system in itself aren't held hostage to it. So for us, it's really about instilling that confidence for both the consumer and, more importantly, for the workforce that we need to keep coming into the system.
So the government employee, and of course for our sector, the aviation employee, the FAA, the year has been very distracting to try to get work done with the FAA. I think the stability that the workforce needs, a long-term stability that you've heard here, not just, okay, we're going to make it now to January 30th, but they need to know that they are going to get paid, that they have jobs to do, that can actually dig into these certification issues that my members need to get this new technology on the aircraft, to make the system safer. The Modern Skies Initiative that we're all members of, we want to see a great system out there that's able to support the new increased capacity, not reduced capacity that we had to show we can do here during the shutdown. But we want to get the eVTOLs of the future going. We want to get these new aircraft that serve the rural communities, the new capabilities that don't need the longer runways. So there's so much activity right now with aviation that, we want that momentum. And the passage of this bill right now, I think, would be key for investment in the workforce of the future.
Thank you. I'll express those views to my colleagues. I know that you will as well.
Senator Moran, if I could add just one thing, since we're talking about those bills and what's moving through and the support from them, I'd be remiss. It was brought up on this panel about another air traffic controller who took their life, and also about the mental health bill for aviation and the aviation professionals in the archaic medical system that remains under, and getting aviators and air traffic controllers the true help. That is something else that is a must-pass bill, and along with the appropriations that is going to go a long way for finally bringing this workforce up to the standards that are needed in getting them the help in advance of them taking their own lives.
What's missing in doing that?
The support of finally getting it passed through. It's out there, it's moving, and we're looking for everyone to support it.
Thank you. I offer my condolences to the air traffic control community and the individuals involved in that death. It is unfortunate sometimes the circumstances of a tragedy is what motivates us to do our jobs better. And January 29th is a circumstance of mine, and I know that the families of those who died in that crash are in constant contact and encouragement to members of Congress, including me, about the importance of moving forward on the air traffic safety plan. And we will do our part, and it's a reminder that you just gave us about things need to be long-term. It's not just fixing a problem for the moment, but that needs consistent attention and consistent appropriations and financial support, and I appreciate that reminder. It's always been my practice to give the witnesses of a hearing I chair the opportunity to say anything that they didn't have a chance to say, that they now thought of, they wish they'd have said. I find myself in that circumstance often, and maybe something I said that I wish I wouldn't have, and you can retract something if you'd like, but anybody want to make certain that there's something included in the record that they feel like they need to now say.
I'd like to start with one thing first. Thank you for having us. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to talk about the issues. I think what this has highlighted and this shutdown has shown in the aviation world is how fragile the system is. But there are some terms that get thrown around, and I would say quite loosely. The terms of calling out. Air traffic controllers have an extremely high record for showing up in the emergencies and crisis of this country. September 11th, a pandemic, 2 of the longest government shutdowns in history, and air traffic controllers showed up and stepped up day in and day out. But the term of art continues to be they're calling in sick. They were calling in with no money. They were calling in with not being able to put gas in their car. They were calling in with not being able to pay for childcare. Those are real issues, real Americans, real patriots that are doing everything they can. They don't want to see that burden on another air traffic controller. So while the term of art may be air traffic controllers are calling out, it's not in protest. We absolutely condemn any coordinated efforts to call out. And the reasons that you saw it in different locations around the country is because what you can't pinpoint is when somebody's life situation and money situation and they're going to run out of it. Or when the stress, the pressure, and the fatigue of being perfect absolutely crushes them that day, and they need to take a moment before reporting to duty to just say, well, I'll give it my best. Air traffic controllers don't have the option to give it their best. They have the duty to be perfect. And anything that we can do to support them through this bill and not allowing them to be subjected as a political pawn again, we absolutely support, we absolutely endorse, and we absolutely need.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Sununu?
No, I would just say thank you, and thank you for the timeliness. I mean, we're just on the heels of it, and so the fact that you're moving so promptly instills a lot of confidence.
Mr. Viola, we were concerned when we scheduled the hearing. We were perhaps expected that maybe the shutdown was still continuing and had some thought about whether the hearing still had merit after the shutdown concluded. And my conclusion was it did have merit so that we could learn from circumstances. Mr. Viola, anything?
No, well, thank you very much for having us here today. I would like to say that, the Modern Skies Coalition and getting the money now, I mean, my time in the FAA, 2015, when we were trying to work forward to get to keep being a leader in aviation and being able to have these new vehicles that service society better. So keeping that momentum going with the $12.5 billion and getting the additional funding would be great.
Who do I call now, Mr. Viola, that when I want something, some certification, some new rule and regulation, some statutory deadline to be met at the FAA?
At the FAA?
Yeah.
Call the administrator.
Oh, of course. I was hoping that you were still going to intercede on my behalf.
Well, you could call me. I absolutely would do my best to work behind the scenes as well.
Yes, sir. Ms. Sprickler, thank you for your maiden testimony to Congress, I assume, and thank you very much for being here. Anything you'd like to make sure that we hear before I conclude this hearing?
I thank you again for the opportunity to tell my story and to be heard.
Thank you for your willingness to tell us. I got to find some magic words in a script.
Oh, I have to read some items I'd like to enter.
Okay, yes, Senator Duckworth.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request unanimous consent that the following documents be entered into the hearing record. A written statement of April Verrett, President of the Service Employees International Union, a September 24th, 2025 letter from Kansas healthcare providers to the Kansas Congressional Delegation in support of extending enhanced premium tax credits, and a September 2025 Urban Institute and Commonwealth Fund health policy brief titled 4.8 million people will lose coverage in 2026 if enhanced premium tax credits expire.
Without objection, those documents will be entered into the committee's record. Now,
Enough time?
you did. I should have just turned the page. Again, I would thank all the witnesses for being here. I wanted to perhaps join Senator Cantwell in her remarks about people who work at airports. I'm a frequent traveler, I guess it's by choice, but I live in Kansas and work here. And I'm in airports and on airplanes on a consistent basis, like almost all of my colleagues. And during the shutdown, I found the employees at the airport, including the ones that Senator Cantwell mentioned, to be, I don't know about good spirits, but they were certainly polite, respectful, kind of we're all in this together kind of attitude. And again, it's something special, I suppose, about Americans and America in times of difficulty and adversity. There's still a common sense that we owe each other respect and try to make certain that the well-being of those who we care for is maintained. And I experienced that without exception And so I thank the folks who work at an airport and the people who work at the airlines and across the country. And just, I worry that we're beginning to take these kind of circumstances as too commonplace, and they ought to be extraordinary and not the norm. But regardless of which one they are, I appreciate people who are polite and respectful. Oh, let me see. Do I have something else I need to do on documents? Okay. There are documents from the Modern Skies Coalition, the National Business Aviation Association, Boeing Aircraft, and one for the American Society of Traveler Advisors that I would ask to be placed into the record, and without objection, I would do so. As a Kansan and someone that the state is hosting FIFA and the Olympics coming up, and as chair of the Congressional Senate Caucus on Travel and Tourism, we need the airlines fully operational and the travel industry capable of meeting significant demands, as many international travelers will be visiting the United States, including Kansas City, in the near future. I thank all of our witnesses for their testimony today. Senators on this committee will have until the close of business on November the 26th to submit questions for the record, and the witnesses will have until the close of business on December the 10th to respond to those questions. What that means is my colleagues and I may ask you questions in writing, and then if you would respond to those questions for the satisfaction of those senators and for the committee record by the December the 10th, that is what we would ask you to do. And that concludes today's hearing, and the committee stands adjourned.